Blind millionaire loses $4, $5 billion company, street girl finds contract fraud. Shocking everyone, her life changes forever. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The gold-plated pen slipped from Richard Blackwood's trembling fingers, clattering against the mahogany table that had witnessed 1,000 victories. And now, his ultimate defeat. The sound echoed through the boardroom like a death knell, each reverberation carrying away another piece of the empire he'd built with his own bare hands. "It's done, Mr. Blackwood," his attorney's voice cut through the silence, cold as winter rain. "Meridian Industries is no longer yours." Richard's unseeing eyes stared into the darkness that had been his companion for the past 3 years, since the accident that took his sight, but never his vision for business. Until today. Today, everything was gone. $4.5 billion swept away like autumn leaves in a hurricane. How? The word barely escaped his lips, a whisper of disbelief that hung in the air like smoke. "The contract you signed 18 months ago," Attorney Morrison continued, his words precise as surgical cuts. "You granted your business partner, Vincent Carmichael, full operational control in the event of certain circumstances. Those circumstances have been met." Richard's mind raced back to that fateful day when Vincent had presented the partnership agreement. His oldest friend, his most trusted advisor, the man who'd stood by him when the blindness threatened to destroy everything. Vincent had insisted the clause was merely a formality, protection for the company's future. Richard had trusted him completely. The circumstances being? Richard's voice was steadier now, the businessman in him demanding answers even as his world crumbled. Gross negligence, leading to financial losses exceeding $2 billion, Morrison read from the documents. The failed acquisition of Technova last quarter triggered the clause automatically. But that acquisition had been Vincent's idea. Vincent's insistence. Vincent's. A chill ran down Richard's spine as the pieces began forming a picture he couldn't see, but was starting to feel with terrifying clarity. "Where is Vincent now?" Richard asked, already knowing the answer would cut deeper than any blade. "Mr. Carmichael is currently in London, finalizing the merger with Peterson Holdings. He sends his regrets that he couldn't be here for the transition." Regrets. The word tasted like poison in Richard's mouth. 53 years old, and he'd lost everything to a man he'd considered a brother. The employees who'd followed him for decades would wake up tomorrow working for someone else. The charitable foundations he'd built would crumble. The legacy he'd planned to leave his late wife's memory would vanish like morning mist. Richard stood slowly, his hand finding the familiar groove worn into his walking cane. "I'd like to be alone now." "Of course, sir. The building security will escort you out whenever you're ready. Your personal effects have been packed and—" I said alone. The authority that had once commanded boardrooms across 3 continents still rang in his voice, even in defeat. The sound of shuffling papers and departing footsteps faded, leaving Richard in the silence of his former kingdom. He moved to the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. Somewhere beyond that barrier was a world that would soon learn of his fall. Richard Blackwood, the blind billionaire who'd defied every limitation, brought down by the one thing his other senses couldn't detect: betrayal. But as he stood there in the growing darkness of both night and his new reality, Richard Blackwood made a promise to himself. This wasn't over. Somehow, somewhere, there had to be a way to expose what Vincent had done. The truth had to be hidden in those contracts, in those meetings, in the labyrinth of legal documents that had become his prison. He just needed to find someone who could see what he could not. 3 floors below, pressed against the cold brick wall of an alley that reeked of forgotten dreams and broken promises, 7-year-old Maya Chen clutched a torn piece of paper she'd pulled from a dumpster. The letters were strange, important-looking words that her teacher at the shelter had taught her to recognize. She couldn't read much yet, but she knew numbers. And the numbers on this crumpled document were bigger than anything she'd ever imagined. Maya looked up at the towering glass building above her, where lights were still burning in a few windows, and wondered what it would be like to never worry about where your next meal was coming from. She had no idea that the paper in her small, dirty hands was about to change 2 lives forever. The morning air bit at Richard's face as he stepped onto the sidewalk, his cane tapping a rhythm of defeat on the concrete. 3 days had passed since he'd signed away his life's work, and the reality was settling in like a physical weight on his chest. His penthouse was gone, sold to cover immediate debts. His car, his art collection, even his late wife Sarah's jewelry, all liquidated. Mister, you dropped something." The voice was small, high-pitched, cutting through the morning traffic noise. Richard paused, turning toward the sound. Children's voices usually meant trouble or pity, neither of which he had patience for today. "I didn't drop anything," he said curtly, continuing his careful navigation down the sidewalk. "But you did. Look, it's important papers with big numbers." Despite himself, Richard stopped. Big numbers. His jaw tightened. Every important document he'd owned was now in Vincent's possession or locked away in legal proceedings. "Little girl, I don't have any papers left to drop." Footsteps pattered closer, and he caught the smell of unwashed clothes and something else. Hunger. The sharp, distinctive scent of someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. "These came from your building," the voice insisted. "From the big trash can behind it. They have your name on them, Richard Blackwood." She sounded out the syllables carefully, like she was still learning to read. Richard's blood chilled. Documents with his name, thrown away behind Meridian Industries. Vincent wouldn't have been so careless. Unless he thought there was no longer any threat. "What do these papers say?" Richard asked, kneeling down to the child's level. "Lots of words I don't know, but numbers. 4 billion, 500 million. And it says, fraud investigation recommended, at the bottom." The world tilted. Richard's hand shot out instinctively, and small, thin fingers placed a stack of crumpled papers into his palm. His fingers traced the letterhead. He knew this texture, this weight of paper. Corporate Investigative Firm Stationery. "Where exactly did you find these?" "The dumpster behind your big building." "I was looking for bottles to trade for food money." No shame in her voice, just matter-of-fact survival. Richard's mind raced. If an investigation had been conducted and Vincent had thrown away the results, it could only mean one thing. The investigation had found something Vincent couldn't let surface. "What's your name, child?" Maya Chen." "I'm 7 3/4. "Maya," Richard repeated, the name feeling strange on his tongue. When was the last time he'd spoken to a 7-year-old? "These papers, they might be very important. Would you be willing to help me understand them better?" "You can't read them?" "I'm blind, Maya. I lost my sight in an accident." A moment of silence, then, "My teacher at the shelter says blind people are just people who see different. She says they see truth better sometimes." Something cracked open in Richard's chest, a space that had been frozen solid for 3 years. "Your teacher sounds very wise." "She is. She taught me numbers and some words before she got sick and couldn't teach anymore. Maya, would you like to earn some money helping me read these documents? I'll buy you breakfast while we work." Another pause. Then quietly, "Real breakfast? Like eggs and toast?" "As much as you can eat." "Okay, Mr. Richard. But I gotta be back at the shelter before dark, or Mrs. Patterson worries." As they walked toward the diner he'd spotted earlier, Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. It was fragile, tentative, like the first green shoot pushing through winter soil. But it was there. Behind them, across the street, a man in an expensive suit lowered his phone and spoke quietly. "Vincent, we have a problem." Blackwood isn't alone anymore. Hmm. The Formica table at Murphy's Diner was sticky with syrup residue, but Maya didn't seem to notice as she attacked her second stack of pancakes with the intensity of someone who'd forgotten what being full felt like. Richard sat across from her, his untouched coffee growing cold as he listened to her reading. Investigative Summary for Meridian Industries, Maya read slowly, her finger tracing each word. Conducted by Harrison Financial Forensics. She paused. What's forensics? It means they look for evidence of crimes in business papers, Richard explained, his pulse quickening. He'd never authorized any investigation by Harrison Financial. Oh, like detectives. Cool. Maya continued. Subject of investigation, Vincent Michael Carmichael, Chief Operating Partner. Richard's knuckles whitened as he gripped his coffee cup. Vincent had been investigated. By whom? And why had Richard never been informed? Financial irregularities discovered in acquisition protocols, Maya continued, stumbling over the bigger words. Dummy corporations established in Cayman Islands. Shell companies used to inflate acquisition costs. Slow down, Maya. Read that part again about the shell companies. Maya repeated the section more carefully. Richard's business mind began connecting dots at lightning speed. The Technova acquisition that had triggered his downfall, Vincent had insisted they use a complex network of subsidiary companies to complete the purchase. He'd claimed it was for tax advantages. What else does it say about Technova? Maya flipped through pages, syrup sticky fingers leaving marks on the documents. Here. Technova acquisition. Actual value $200 million. Price paid by Meridian, $3 billion. Difference routed through shell companies controlled by V. Carmichael. The diner seemed to spin around Richard. $2.1 billion. Vincent hadn't just stolen his company, he'd orchestrated the entire collapse to cover a massive theft. Maya, is there a date on this report? March 15th, 2024. 6 months before the acquisition was finalized. Someone had known about Vincent's fraud half a year before Richard lost everything, and that someone had tried to warn. Who? Is there a name on who this report was supposed to go to? Maya studied the paper carefully. It says, Confidential Report for R. Blackwood, CEO, Meridian Industries. Richard's blood ran cold. The report had been meant for him. Vincent must have intercepted it, buried it, then accelerated his timeline to steal the company before Richard could discover the truth. Maya, you said you found these in the dumpster. When exactly? Yesterday morning, real early, before the trash trucks came. Hey, which meant Vincent had only just discarded them, probably thinking the danger was past with Richard, now powerless and broke. Mr. Richard, are you okay? You look really pale. Richard realized his hands were shaking. Maya, do you understand what these papers mean? Somebody stole money from you? Somebody stole everything from me. And these papers prove it. He leaned forward. Maya, would you be willing to help me take these documents to the police? Will they believe us? I'm just a kid from the shelter, and you don't have your company anymore. It was a fair question. Who would believe a ruined blind man and a 7-year-old street child against Vincent Carmichael, now the head of a multi-billion-dollar corporation? We'll make them believe us, Richard said with more confidence than he felt. But first, we need to find the investigator who wrote this report, Harrison Financial Forensics. Maya was quiet for a moment, then, Mr. Richard, if we prove the bad man stole from you, will you get your company back? I don't know, Maya, maybe. But it's the right thing to do regardless. Good. My teacher always said doing the right thing is hard, but that's what makes it right. As Richard signaled for the check, he didn't notice the man at the corner booth speaking quietly into his phone. They have the Harrison report. Vincent needs to know immediately. Harrison Financial Forensics occupied a modest office building in downtown Seattle, sandwiched between a Vietnamese restaurant and a copy shop. Maya wrinkled her nose at the smell of fish sauce that permeated the hallway as they climbed to the third floor. "Are you sure this is right?" Richard asked, running his fingers along the building directory they'd found in the lobby. "Suite 312, Harrison Financial Forensics," Maya read aloud. "This is it." But when they reached Suite 312, they found only empty space visible through a glass door. Maya pressed her face against the window. "There's nothing here, Mr. Richard, just some old desks and boxes." Richard's heart sank. "Are you certain this is 312? "Yes, the numbers are right here on the door, but there's a sign." Maya struggled with the words. "Feliz, available immediately." They'd been too late. Someone had gotten here first. "Excuse me," a voice called from behind them. "Are you looking for Harrison Forensics?" Richard turned toward the voice. "Yes, we are. I'm Richard Blackwood." "Oh my God." "Oh." The voice was female, middle-aged, tinged with shock. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm Jennifer Martinez. I used to be Dr. Harrison's assistant." "Used to be?" "Dr. Harrison died 3 weeks ago. Heart attack, completely sudden. The office closed immediately after." Jennifer's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mr. Blackwood, I need to talk to you, but not here. Too many people have been asking questions about Dr. Harrison's files." Maya tugged on Richard's coat. "Mr. Richard, she sounds scared." Jennifer led them to a coffee shop 2 blocks away, constantly checking over her shoulder. Once they were seated in a corner booth, she spoke in hushed tones. "Doctor, Harrison completed your investigation 6 months ago, Mr. Blackwood. He tried to contact you repeatedly, but your office always said you were unavailable. I never received any messages about an investigation. I never authorized one either." "You didn't authorize it. Someone else did. Someone who signed your name to the contract." Jennifer pulled out a manila folder she'd been clutching. "Dr. Harrison suspected forgery, but the retainer check cleared, so he completed the work." Richard's jaw tightened. "Someone forged my signature to investigate my own business partner. Dr. Harrison thought maybe you suspected Mr. Carmichael and were being careful about internal security, but when you never responded to his calls, he got worried." Maya had been listening intently. Who paid for the investigation if Mr. Richard didn't? Jennifer looked surprised to be addressed by the child, but answered seriously. "The check came from something called Phoenix Trust, Doctor. Harrison tried to trace it, but it led nowhere, just another shell company." Richard's mind raced. Someone had known about Vincent's fraud, had paid for an investigation, but had made sure Richard never received the results. It was almost as if, "Ms. Martinez, in Dr. Harrison's opinion, who do you think hired him?" He had a theory, but no proof. He thought maybe it was someone inside Meridian Industries who discovered the fraud, but couldn't come forward directly. Someone with access to company letterhead to forge your signature, but not enough power to stop Mr. Carmichael directly. "An insider," Richard murmured. "That changed everything." Someone at Meridian had known about Vincent's theft and had tried to expose it through back channels. "Ms. Martinez," Maya piped up, "do you have more papers like the ones we found?" "I have copies of everything. Dr. Harrison made me promise to keep duplicates off-site in case something happened." Jennifer's voice caught. "I think maybe he knew he was in danger." "You think Dr. Harrison was murdered?" Richard asked bluntly. "I think a healthy 45-year-old man doesn't just drop dead of a heart attack the day after Vincent Carmichael's security team showed up asking about his files. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too exposed." Richard could sense Maya tensing beside him, picking up on the adult fear in the conversation. "Ms. Martinez, I need those files, all of them. Mr. Blackwood, if they killed Dr. Harrison for what he knew, what do you think they'll do to you, to that little girl?" Richard felt Maya's small hand slip into his, trusting and brave despite her fear. "Then we'll have to be very careful," Richard said. but Maya found evidence they thought was safely destroyed. That means Vincent is getting careless. It's time to turn his own tactics against him. As they left the coffee shop with Jennifer's promise to retrieve the hidden files, none of them noticed the man in the dark sedan who'd been following them since they left the shelter that morning. Vincent Carmichael's cleanup crew was already in motion. The Seattle Public Library's reading room felt like a sanctuary, its high ceilings and hushed atmosphere providing a false sense of security. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor beside Richard's chair, organizing the massive pile of documents Jennifer Martinez had delivered that morning. Each stack represented a different aspect of Vincent's elaborate fraud. "Mr. Richard, this one has pictures," Maya said, sliding a folder toward him. "Bank statements with numbers highlighted in yellow." Richard's fingers traced the braille annotations Jennifer had thoughtfully added to key documents. The scope of Vincent's theft was staggering. Not just the $1 billion from the Technova fraud, but years of smaller embezzlements, forged contracts, and diverted funds. His oldest friend had been systematically looting Meridian Industries for at least 5 years. "Maya, what does the cover letter say? The one from Dr. Harrison to me." Maya read carefully. "Mr. Blackwood, the evidence contained in this report indicates criminal fraud on a massive scale. I strongly recommend immediate termination of Vincent Carmichael and criminal prosecution. The pattern suggests he may accelerate his timeline if he suspects discovery. Please contact me immediately upon receipt." When was that letter dated? March 20th, 2024. Richard closed his eyes. If he'd received that warning in March, he could have stopped Vincent before the Technova acquisition destroyed everything. Instead, Vincent had intercepted the report and used it as a roadmap to expedite his theft. "Mr. Richard," Maya's voice was quieter now. "There's someone watching us." Richard's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "A man in a black suit. He's been pretending to read the same magazine for 20 minutes, but he keeps looking at our table. And there was another man outside the coffee shop yesterday, too." Richard felt ice in his veins. "Maya, very casually, can you gather up the papers and put them in the bag?" "Already doing it," Maya whispered. "Should we run?" "No running. We're going to walk normally to the children's section, then take the back stairs." As they stood to leave, Richard heard footsteps approaching, fast, purposeful. "Mr. Blackwood." The voice was professional, dangerous. "I think you need to stop digging into things that don't concern you anymore." Richard turned toward the voice, placing himself between the man and Maya. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" "We have mutual friends. Friends who think you should focus on your new circumstances rather than dwelling on the past." "You mean Vincent Carmichael?" "I mean people who can make your life very difficult or very short." The threat was spoken quietly, conversationally, like ordering coffee. Maya's small hand gripped Richard's coat. He could feel her trembling. "As you can see," Richard said, "I'm just a blind man reading in the library with a child, hardly a threat to anyone." That child found something she shouldn't have, documents that were supposed to stay buried. So they knew about Maya's discovery, which meant they'd been watching longer than he'd realized. "I don't know what you're talking about," Richard lied. "Mr. Blackwood, this is your only warning. Drop this investigation. Stop asking questions. Forget whatever you think you've learned." The man's voice dropped even lower. "Because accidents happen, even to little girls." The explicit threat against Maya ignited something primal in Richard. His cane swept out instinctively, connecting with the man's legs. As the stranger stumbled, Richard grabbed Maya's hand. "Run," he whispered. They made it to the children's section before Richard heard shouts behind them. Maya guided him through maze of low bookshelves, her small size an advantage as she ducked under tables and around reading nooks. "Fire exit," Maya panted, pulling him toward a door. "It'll make noise, but—" The alarm shrieked as they burst through into the alley behind the library. Maya led him in a zigzag pattern through narrow streets, her knowledge of the neighborhood's hiding places keeping them ahead of pursuit. They finally stopped in an abandoned loading dock, both breathing hard. "Mr. Richard, they know about me," Maya said, her voice small. "They know I found the papers. Maya, I want you to go back to the shelter. Stay there. Don't come looking for me. No." Her voice was firm despite her obvious fear. "They threaten me, which means they're scared of what we know. That means we're getting close. Maya, these are dangerous people. They killed Dr. Harrison, and they're going to kill more people if we don't stop them." Maya's 7-year-old logic was unassailable. "Besides, you need me. I can read the papers and see things you can't." Richard knelt down, feeling for Maya's face with his hands. She was so small, so vulnerable, but she was also brave in a way that put his own courage to shame. "If we do this, we do it smart. No more public places. We need somewhere safe to work." "I know a place," Maya said. "My teacher's apartment. She's in the hospital, but I still have her key. She told me to use it if I ever needed help." As they slipped through the shadows toward Maya's sanctuary, Richard realized something had fundamentally changed. This was no longer just about recovering his stolen company. Vincent's threats against Maya had made it personal in a way that transcended money or justice. This was now about protecting the brave little girl who'd chosen to help him when she had every reason to stay invisible. But first, they needed to find out who at Meridian Industries had tried to warn him about Vincent's fraud, because that person might be the key to everything, if they were still alive. Maya's teacher lived in a rundown apartment building where the elevator smelled like cabbage and broken dreams. Maya led Richard up 3 flights of stairs, her keys jingling as she unlocked a door marked 3B. "Miss Sarah always said I could come here if I needed help," Maya explained, flipping on the lights. "She's been in the hospital for 2 weeks now. Cancer." Richard's breath caught. "Your teacher's name is Sarah?" "Sarah Mitchell. She used to work at Meridian Industries before she became a teacher. She said big business was too mean for her, so she wanted to help kids instead." The room spun around Richard. His late wife's maiden name had been Mitchell, Sarah Mitchell. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Maya, how old is Miss Sarah? Maybe 40? She has brown hair and kind eyes, and she always smells like vanilla perfume." Richard's legs gave out, and he sank into what felt like a small armchair. His wife Sarah had a younger sister named Sarah. They'd lost touch after his wife died. Grief had made him push away everyone who reminded him of his loss. "Maya, does Miss Sarah ever talk about her family?" "She said she had a sister who died, and that her brother-in-law stopped speaking to the family after. She was really sad about it." Maya paused. "Why, Mr. Richard? You look funny." I think Miss Sarah might be my sister-in-law." Maya gasped. "Really?" "She talks about her sister all the time, says she was married to a businessman who built buildings and helped people, but then he couldn't see anymore and got really sad." The description hit Richard like a physical blow. After his wife died and he lost his sight, he'd retreated from everyone, including Sarah's family. He'd been drowning in grief and hadn't wanted their pity. "Maya, if Miss Sarah used to work at Meridian Industries, maybe she was the one who—" "Who what?" Richard's mind raced. Someone at Meridian had forged his signature to hire Dr. Harrison. Someone with inside knowledge and access to company letterhead. Someone who cared enough about him to risk exposure. "Maya, I need to search Miss Sarah's apartment very carefully if she's who I think she is and if she's the one who hired Dr. Harrison." "You want to look through her stuff? Isn't that wrong?" "Normally, yes. But if she tried to warn me about Vincent and I was too proud and stupid to listen, then maybe she has information that could save both our lives." Maya considered this seriously. Miss Sarah always said doing the right thing sometimes means breaking little rules to stop big bad things. They spent the next hour going through Sarah's modest apartment. In a desk drawer, Maya found a folder labeled Richard, Emergency Only. "Should I open it?" Maya asked. "Yes." Inside were copies of emails, financial records, and a handwritten letter addressed to Richard. Maya read the letter aloud. "Dear Richard, I know you won't speak to me because I remind you of Sarah, but I've discovered something terrible at Meridian. Vincent Carmichael has been stealing from you for years. I have proof, but I can't approach you directly. Vincent watches all your communications. I'm hiring a private investigator using a fake name and forged signature. I'm sorry for the deception, but it's the only way. If something happens to me, the evidence is hidden in Sarah's grave. Your loving sister-in-law, Sarah Mitchell." Maya's voice was small when she finished reading. "Mr. Richard, are you crying?" Richard wiped his eyes, overwhelmed by guilt and grief. Sarah Mitchell had risked her job, her safety, everything to try to protect him from Vincent's betrayal. And he'd been so buried in his own pain that he'd never even known she was trying to help. "Maya, we need to get to the cemetery now." "But visiting hours are over. It's almost dark." "Then we'll have to break another little rule to stop a big bad thing." As they prepared to leave, Maya's voice was unusually quiet. "Mr. Richard, what if Miss Sarah dies in the hospital before we can tell her we found her message?" Richard knelt down and pulled Maya into a hug, the first time he'd embraced anyone since his wife's death. "Then we'll make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. We'll stop Vincent, and we'll make him pay for every life he's destroyed." Outside, the man in the dark sedan spoke into his radio. "They're on the move again. And, sir, they're heading toward the cemetery. Should we intercept?" Vincent Carmichael's voice crackled through the speaker. "Let them go. I want to know what they're looking for, but make sure they don't leave alive with whatever they find." As Maya and Richard disappeared into the Seattle twilight, neither of them realized they were walking into a trap that had been 3 years in the making. Greenwood Cemetery lay shrouded in Seattle's perpetual mist, its wrought-iron gates standing like sentinels against the dying light. Maya had picked the lock with surprising skill, a talent learned during her months on the streets, while Richard kept watch with ears trained for approaching footsteps. "This way," Maya whispered, consulting the map Sarah Mitchell had drawn on the back of her letter. "Section 7, Row M. Your wife's grave should be under the big oak tree." They moved carefully through the maze of headstones, Maya guiding Richard around marble angels and weathered crosses. The familiar weight of grief settled on Richard's shoulders as they approached the place he hadn't visited since the funeral 3 years ago. "Here," Maya said softly. "Sarah Elizabeth Blackwood, beloved wife and light of my life." Richard knelt beside the headstone, his fingers tracing the engraved letters. Sarah had chosen this spot herself during her final weeks, saying she wanted to rest under the oak where they'd had their first kiss as teenagers. "The letter said the evidence is hidden here, but where?" Maya asked, scanning the area. Richard's hands moved across the base of the headstone, feeling for anything unusual. Behind the marble, his fingers found a small metal box wedged between the stone and the earth. "Found it," he breathed, pulling out a waterproof container about the size of a jewelry box. Inside were USB drives, photographs, and a thick folder marked Vincent Carmichael, Complete Financial Crimes. Maya's flashlight illuminated photographs of documents, bank statements, and email printouts. "Mr. Richard, this is everything. Bank transfers, forged signatures, even recordings of phone calls." "Sarah was thorough," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion and admiration. His sister-in-law had documented years of Vincent's criminal activity, building an airtight case that would send him to prison for decades. "There's a note here too," Maya said. "It says, 'Richard, Vincent killed Sarah. The cancer was real, But he accelerated it, slow-acting poison in her medication. I have proof. He knew she suspected him. You're next. Trust no one at Meridian except Detective James Rodriguez, Seattle PD. He's the only one who can't be bought. Sarah M. The words hit Richard like lightning. Vincent hadn't just stolen his company and his fortune. He'd murdered his wife. The cancer that had ravaged Sarah's body had been natural, but Vincent had ensured it killed her faster, stealing their last precious months together. Maya, we need to leave. Now. But as they stood to go, flashlight beams cut through the darkness around them. 6 men emerged from behind headstones and mausoleums, forming a circle with no escape route. Mr. Blackwood, a familiar voice called from the shadows. I really hoped it wouldn't come to this. Vincent Carmichael stepped into view, impeccably dressed even for a midnight cemetery confrontation. Behind him walked the man who'd threatened them at the library. Hello, Vincent, Richard said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. Come to visit Sarah's grave? You should. After all, you put her here. Vincent's laugh was cold as winter rain. Sarah was always too curious for her own good, just like her meddling little sister here. His gaze fixed on Maya, who had moved protectively behind Richard. You killed my wife. I saved her from a prolonged, painful death. Really, Richard, you should thank me. And Dr. Harrison? Heart attack. Stress of discovering how deep his investigation had gone. Amazing how stress affects the cardiovascular system. Maya's small voice cut through the tension. You're a monster. Vincent smiled at her with predatory interest. And you're the little street rat who's caused me so much trouble. Tell me, child, do you know what happens to people who threaten powerful men? They go to jail, Maya said defiantly. No, sweetheart, they disappear. Richard's cane swept out, connecting with the nearest man's legs as he lunged toward Maya. Run, Maya! Get to Detective Rodriguez! But there was nowhere to run. The circle of men closed in as Maya clutched the evidence container against her chest, her small form dwarfed by the towering headstones around them. Nobody needs to get hurt here, Vincent said conversationally. Just give me the evidence, and we can discuss a settlement. Maybe a nice offshore account for your retirement, Richard. A trust fund for the girl. The same kind of trust fund you set up for yourself with my stolen money. I prefer to think of it as severance pay. After all, I did work very hard building your company for you. Richard laughed bitterly. You mean destroying it, but that was always the plan, wasn't it? Not just theft, complete destruction. But why, Vincent? We were friends for 30 years. Vincent's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw and poisonous underneath. Friends? You mean employee and employer? You, the golden boy with the inherited seed money and the brilliant wife. Me, the faithful sidekick who did all the real work while you got all the credit. You had equity, profit sharing, everything. Everything but what I really wanted. Sarah. She chose you, Richard. Beautiful, brilliant Sarah chose a man who would go blind and weak while I stayed strong and capable. The revelation hit Richard like a physical blow. Vincent hadn't just coveted his business success, he'd been obsessed with Sarah. The theft, the murder, all of it stemmed from a 30-year jealousy that had festered into homicidal rage. You're insane, Richard whispered. I'm practical. Sarah's gone, your company is mine, and soon you'll both join her. The only loose end will be tied up. But as Vincent raised his hand to signal his men, Maya did something unexpected. She screamed, not in fear, but in rage, and hurled the evidence container as hard as she could toward the cemetery gates. The metal box sailed through the darkness, crashing against a headstone and scattering documents across the wet grass. In the chaos that followed, as Vincent's men scrambled to recover the scattered papers, Richard heard the sound he'd been praying for. Police sirens, getting closer. The sirens were definitely approaching, but Vincent's men had already recovered most of the scattered documents. Richard could hear Maya breathing hard beside him, her defiant act having bought them precious seconds, but not freedom. "Clever little girl," Vincent said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "But ultimately pointless. We'll collect everything and be gone long before Seattle's finest arrive." "Detective Rodriguez already has copies," Maya lied boldly. "Miss Sarah gave them to him before she got sick." Vincent's pause told Richard the bluff had hit home. "You're lying." "Am I?" Maya's voice carried a confidence that impressed Richard. "Why do you think we came here so late? We already talked to the police. They're probably at your house right now." The sirens were definitely getting closer. Richard could hear at least 3 vehicles moving fast through the narrow cemetery access road. "Boss, we need to go," one of Vincent's men urged. "Now!" But Vincent wasn't finished. 30 years, Richard. 30 years I watched you stumble through decisions while I did the real work. 30 years of being your shadow while you got the recognition. Vincent, you were my partner, my best friend. I was your employee." The words exploded from Vincent with decades of suppressed rage. "Sarah saw it too. Do you know what she said to me at your wedding reception? She thanked me for taking such good care of Richard's business affairs. Like I was hired help, like I was nothing." Richard could hear the madness clearly now, the way obsession had twisted Vincent's perception of their relationship. "Sarah respected you. Sarah pitied me. Just like you did, the loyal friend who never quite measured up." Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper. "But when I poisoned her medication, when I watched her waste away while you held her hand, then I was the powerful one. Then I was in control." The confession hung in the misty air like a death sentence. Even Vincent's own men shifted uncomfortably at the raw hatred in their employer's voice. "And when you lost your sight," Vincent continued, "I thought justice was finally being served. The golden boy brought low. But even blind, you still inspired more loyalty than I ever could. So I decided to take everything. Your company, your legacy, your life." "Vincent," Richard started. "Don't say my name like we're still friends," Vincent screamed. "You never saw me, really saw me. I was just convenient, useful, faithful Vincent. Well, now you can't see anything at all." The sirens had reached the cemetery gates. Flashlight beams swept across the headstones as police officers poured through the entrance. Seattle police, everyone on the ground. But Vincent wasn't finished with his confession. "Do you want to know the beautiful part, Richard? I didn't just steal your money, I stole your identity. For the past 6 months, I've been Richard Blackwood. Your reputation, your connections, your place in the world, all mine. And it's about to all come crashing down." Detective Rodriguez's voice cut through the darkness as armed officers surrounded Vincent's group. "Vincent Carmichael, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and murder." But Vincent still had one card to play. In the confusion of the arrest, he grabbed Maya, pressing a small pistol to her head. "Everyone back off. I'm leaving here with the girl, and anyone who tries to stop me will be responsible for what happens to her." Richard's blood turned to ice. All their planning, all their courage, and it came down to this: Maya in the hands of a madman who'd already killed twice. "Vincent, let her go. Your fight is with me." "No, Richard, my fight is with a world that never gave me what I deserved, and this little street rat is going to ensure I finally get what's mine." The standoff stretched across the cemetery like a held breath. Police sharpshooters took positions behind headstones, while Vincent backed toward a maintenance shed, dragging Maya with him. But Maya wasn't done fighting. As they passed near Sarah's grave, she suddenly stomped down hard on Vincent's foot and elbowed him in the ribs with all her 7-year-old strength. "That's for Miss Sarah and Mrs. Blackwood," she shouted as she broke free. Vincent stumbled, and in that moment of vulnerability, Detective Rodriguez's taser found its target. The man who'd stolen billions and murdered innocents collapsed beside the grave of the woman whose death had started his final unraveling. As the police led Vincent away in handcuffs, Maya ran to Richard's side. "We did it, Mr. Richard. We got the bad man." But Richard knew this was only the beginning. Vincent's arrest would trigger investigations that would reach into every corner of his stolen empire. The real work of rebuilding was just starting, and they still didn't know how deep the conspiracy reached. The Seattle Police Department's interview room smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. Richard sat across from Detective Rodriguez, while Maya curled up in a chair beside him, exhausted but refusing to leave his side. The events of the cemetery were only 6 hours behind them, but already the scope of Vincent's crimes was expanding beyond anything they'd imagined. "Mr. Blackwood, we've been analyzing the evidence your sister-in-law collected," Detective Rodriguez said, spreading documents across the metal table. "This isn't just about Meridian Industries. Vincent Carmichael was running a criminal organization that stretched across 12 states and 3 countries. Richard's fingers traced the braille summary Rodriguez had prepared. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands, bribes to city officials, connections to Russian money laundering operations. Vincent hadn't just been stealing from Meridian, he'd been using the company as a front for international crime. "How many other victims?" Richard asked. "At least 40 companies. Small businesses mostly. Vincent would identify struggling firms, offer consulting services, then systematically loot their assets while driving them into bankruptcy." Rodriguez's voice carried professional disgust. "He particularly targeted family businesses, companies where the owners trusted their advisors completely." Maya looked up from the coloring book someone had given her. "Like he did to Mr. Richard?" "Exactly like that, sweetheart." But Richard was processing something more disturbing. "Detective, if Vincent was running this large an operation, he couldn't have done it alone. There had to be others at Meridian who knew what was happening. That's what we're discovering. We arrested 3 more executives this morning, including your former CFO, Margaret Stevenson." The name hit Richard like a slap. Margaret had been with Meridian for 12 years, had attended his wife's funeral, had sent him flowers when he lost his sight. Margaret was involved? Up to her eyebrows. She was the one who falsified the financial reports that made the Technova acquisition look legitimate. Without her cooperation, Vincent never could have stolen $2 billion without triggering automatic fraud alerts. Richard felt sick. How many people he'd trusted had been systematically betraying him? Who else? Your head of security, Thomas Wright. Your legal counsel, David Park. Even your personal assistant, Linda Morrison. Each name was another knife to Richard's heart. These weren't just employees. They were people he'd considered family. People who'd had access to his personal life, his medical information, his grief counseling sessions after Sarah's death. "Why?" Richard asked. "They all had good salaries, profit sharing. Vincent paid better," Rodriguez said bluntly, "and he had leverage. Wright was gambling, owed money to some very bad people. Park was embezzling from client accounts to support a drug habit. Morrison was being blackmailed over an affair." Maya's small voice cut through Richard's shock. He found out their secrets and made them help him. "That's exactly right, Maya. Vincent Carmichael was very good at finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them." Richard slumped in his chair, overwhelmed by the scope of the betrayal. Not just Vincent, but a network of conspirators who'd been systematically destroying everything he'd built while smiling to his face and attending company Christmas parties. "There's more," Rodriguez continued. "We found evidence that Vincent was planning to eliminate you and Maya permanently, not just financially, but physically. The cemetery was supposed to be your final resting place, but we caught him," Maya said. "We caught Vincent, but his network included people outside Meridian Industries. The men who threatened you at the library, the ones who've been following you, they work for a private security firm with connections to organized crime. Richard's blood chilled. Are Maya and I still in danger? Vincent's arrest has triggered a chain reaction. His criminal associates are either fleeing the country or eliminating evidence. Some of them might see you as loose ends that need tying up. So, what do we do? Witness protection, at least temporarily. We need to keep you both safe while we roll up the rest of Vincent's network. Maya looked alarmed. Does that mean we have to go away? What about Miss Sarah in the hospital? What about getting Mr. Richard's company back? Rodriguez smiled at her concern. The good news is that Vincent's arrests have frozen all his assets. The courts will be sorting out what belongs to whom, but Mr. Blackwood, you'll likely recover most of what was stolen from you. And Sarah Mitchell? She's recovering. The doctors stopped the poison medication regime as soon as we told them what Vincent had been doing. She's weak, but she's going to live. For the first time in months, Richard felt something approaching hope, not just for himself, but for Maya, for Sarah, for all of Vincent's victims who might finally see justice. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. There's one more thing. We found communications between Vincent and someone he called the architect, someone who was apparently the real brains behind the operation. Richard's newfound hope evaporated. Vincent wasn't the top of the food chain? We don't think so. And whoever the architect is, they're still out there, still dangerous. Maya's hand found Richard's, small fingers intertwining with his larger ones. Then we'll find them too, she said with 7-year-old certainty. We're good at finding bad people now. Rodriguez chuckled, but his expression remained serious. Maya, you and Mr. Blackwood have done incredible work. But this last piece, finding the architect, that's a job for law enforcement. Maybe, Richard said quietly. But Vincent made one crucial mistake. He assumed I was helpless because I couldn't see. He never imagined that a blind man and a street-smart 7-year-old could bring down his entire empire. What are you thinking, Mr. Richard? Maya asked. I'm thinking the architect made the same mistake Vincent did. They think we're no longer a threat. But we have something they don't. What's that? We have nothing left to lose, and that makes us the most dangerous people in the world. As they left the police station under protective escort, none of them knew that the architect was already planning their next move, one that would make Vincent Carmichael's crimes look like petty theft in comparison. The safe house was a modest ranch home in suburban Bellevue, the kind of place where soccer moms and insurance salesmen lived quiet, predictable lives. Maya had been asleep for 3 hours, curled up on the living room couch with a police dog named Bruno standing guard. Richard sat in the kitchen, listening to Detective Rodriguez explain the latest developments in the case. We've identified the architect, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying a weight that made Richard's stomach clench. You're not going to like this. After everything I've learned this week, I'm not sure anything could surprise me anymore. Judge Patricia Hawthorne. The name hit Richard like lightning. Judge Hawthorne had presided over dozens of corporate cases in King County for the past 15 years. She'd officiated Richard and Sarah's wedding. She'd been a family friend, a mentor, someone Richard had trusted completely. That's impossible, Richard whispered. I wish it were. We found financial records showing payments from Vincent's network totaling over $50 million across 8 years. She wasn't just taking bribes, she was orchestrating the entire operation. Richard's mind reeled. Judge Hawthorne had access to sealed court documents, inside information on corporate investigations, advanced knowledge of regulatory changes. She could have steered cases toward outcomes that benefited Vincent's schemes while appearing completely legitimate. The bankruptcy proceedings that destroyed Vincent's early victims, Rodriguez continued, she expedited those. The regulatory investigation into Meridian that was dropped last year, she made sure the right pressure was applied to the right people. She was at Sarah's funeral, Richard said, remembering the judge's tearful condolences, her offer to help with legal matters during his grief. She held my hand and told me Sarah was like a daughter to her. According to the communications we intercepted, she was already planning your downfall at that point. Vincent's poisoning of your wife was her idea. Eliminate Sarah before she could expose too much of their operation. The words felt like acid in Richard's veins. Judge Hawthorne hadn't just been complicit in Sarah's murder, she'd been the architect of it. Why? Richard asked. She had money, prestige, respect, power. Pure, simple power. She saw herself as the puppet master, pulling strings behind the scenes while everyone else danced to her music. Vincent was just her most successful puppet. Maya stirred on the couch, mumbling in her sleep. Richard felt a fierce protective surge. This child who'd saved his life was still in danger because of people he'd trusted with everything. What's her next move? Richard asked. We don't know yet, but she's got to be feeling cornered. Vincent's arrest has compromised the entire network. She's got millions in hidden assets, connections to people who can disappear her permanently, and a reputation to protect. Richard's phone buzzed, a text message. Rodriguez read it aloud. Mr. Lackwood, this is Judge Hawthorne. I understand you've had quite an ordeal. Would you be available for dinner tomorrow evening? I'd like to discuss some legal options for recovering your assets. I'm sure we can find a mutually beneficial arrangement. She's making her play, Rodriguez said grimly, trying to lure you out of protection. Or maybe she's ready to surrender, Richard suggested. Richard, this woman orchestrated the murder of your wife and the theft of your entire life. She's not inviting you to dinner to apologize. Maya sat up on the couch, rubbing her eyes. What's happening? Why do you sound worried? Richard moved to sit beside her. Maya, remember when we talked about the person behind Vincent? We found her. Her? Judge Hawthorne. She was Vincent's boss. Maya's face scrunched in concentration. The judge lady who was nice to us at Miss Sarah's wedding? But she was really kind to me. She gave me cake and said I was smart. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the kindest. Rodriguez's radio crackled. Detective, we've got movement on the Hawthorne surveillance. She's leaving her residence with multiple vehicles. Looks like she's running. Or setting a trap, Richard said quietly. Maya looked between them. What are we going to do? Richard was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then, Detective, what would happen if Judge Hawthorne disappeared? Could she escape justice? With her connections and resources, probably. We don't have enough physical evidence to guarantee a conviction even if we catch her. But we have something she doesn't know about. What's that? Richard smiled grimly. We have Maya, and Maya has a gift for finding things that people think they've hidden. Rodriguez looked skeptical. Richard, I can't let you use a 7-year-old as bait. Not bait, insurance. Richard turned toward Maya. Maya, when we were in Miss Sarah's apartment, you found that hidden folder on your first try. How did you know where to look? I don't know. I just feel where people would hide important things, like where would I hide something if I was scared? Maya has street instincts that none of us have, Richard explained to Rodriguez. She survived on her own for months by reading people, by knowing when something was dangerous or wrong. What are you proposing? Judge Hawthorne is going to make one final play to eliminate us. When she does, Maya might be the key to finding evidence that even the judge doesn't know she's left behind. Maya nodded seriously. Like a treasure hunt. But the treasure is a proof that she's bad? Exactly like that. Rodriguez sighed. This is insane. You're talking about deliberately walking into danger. Detective, we've been in danger since the moment Maya found those papers in the dumpster. The only difference now is that we know who we're fighting. Outside, a black sedan pulled up across the street. In the passenger seat, Judge Patricia Hawthorne lowered her binoculars and smiled coldly. "They think they're safe," she murmured to her driver. "Let's show them how wrong they are." The final game was about to begin. Judge Hawthorne's dinner invitation came with an address Richard didn't recognize, a private dining room at the Columbia Tower Club, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant 40 floors above the city. The location was strategic, public enough to seem safe, private enough for a quiet elimination. "This is a trap," Detective Rodriguez said for the 10th time as they prepared for the evening. "She's desperate, cornered, and she's got nothing left to lose." "Neither do we," Richard replied, adjusting the wire that police technicians had fitted under his shirt. "And that gives us the advantage." Maya sat on the safe house couch, carefully studying photographs of the Columbia Tower building that Rodriguez had provided. Her 7-year-old mind processed the layout with surprising tactical awareness. "Mr. Richard, if she's really bad, why would she pick a place with only one way out? Look," Maya pointed to the building schematics. "The restaurant is on the 40th floor, and the only exit is through the elevator or the emergency stairs." Rodriguez looked impressed, despite himself. "Maya's right. It's a tactical disadvantage for someone planning an escape." "Unless she's not planning to escape," Richard said quietly. "Maybe she's planning to ensure none of us leave that building alive." The drive to downtown Seattle felt like a funeral procession. Richard sat in the back of an unmarked police car, Maya beside him, clutching a small backpack containing the one piece of evidence they'd held back from the official investigation. Sarah Mitchell's personal journal, which documented conversations with Judge Hawthorne about cleaning up loose ends. "Maya, when we get inside, I need you to watch everything, not just what people say, but how they move, where they look, what makes them nervous." "Like hunting," Maya said seriously. "Miss Sarah taught me that scared people always look toward their escape route first." "Exactly." Odul, the Columbia Tower's lobby was marble and brass opulence, the kind of place that made visitors feel small and insignificant. Judge Hawthorne was waiting by the elevators, immaculately dressed and radiating the authority of her office. "Richard," she said warmly, embracing him like the old family friend she'd pretended to be. "And Maya, darling, how lovely to see you again." But Maya's response surprised everyone. "You smell different." Judge Hawthorne paused. "I'm sorry? At Miss Sarah's wedding, you smelled like vanilla and kindness. Now you smell like fear and mean thoughts." The judge's smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Children say the most interesting things, don't they?" As they rode the elevator to the 40th floor, Maya whispered to Richard, "She's got something sharp in her purse, metal, and there's another man already upstairs. I can smell his cologne from here." The restaurant was empty except for staff, who disappeared as soon as they were seated. Judge Hawthorne had arranged for complete privacy, never a good sign when dealing with a criminal mastermind. "Richard, I want to discuss a settlement," she began without preamble. "Vincent's actions have caused tremendous damage, but there are ways to minimize the collateral damage to innocent parties." "Innocent parties, meaning you?" "Meaning all of us. You, me, even little Maya here." The judge's eyes fixed on Maya with predatory intensity. Vincent was a rogue actor. His crimes need not reflect on others who were peripherally involved. Richard laughed bitterly. "Peripherally involved? You orchestrated my wife's murder." "Sarah was dying anyway. We simply accelerated a natural process to prevent unnecessary suffering." Maya's small voice cut through the tension. "You're lying. Miss Sarah told me her sister was getting better before the medicine got changed." Judge Hawthorne's mask finally slipped completely. "Clever little girl. Too clever for your own good." The man Maya had smelled appeared from behind a pillar, Vincent's former head of security, Thomas Wright. His presence confirmed what Richard had feared. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution. "Patricia, we need to move fast," Wright said. "Police surveillance is still active." "Of course they are." Judge Hawthorne stood, her hand moving to her purse. "Richard, I had hoped we could resolve this amicably. Unfortunately, you and your little friend know too much to be allowed to walk away." But Maya was already in motion. As Wright moved toward them, she slipped under the table and emerged near Judge Hawthorne's chair. Her small hands moved with street-smart precision, snatching the judge's purse and darting toward the restaurant's service entrance. "Stop her!" Hawthorne screamed, but Maya had vanished into the restaurant's kitchen area, and Wright's attention was divided between pursuing her and controlling Richard. "Maya found something," Richard said with satisfaction, "and now you'll never get it back." In the kitchen, Maya was doing exactly what Richard hoped, not just hiding, but searching. Her street instincts led her to the one place adults never thought to look, the space between the industrial refrigerator and the wall, where she discovered something that made her gasp. Documents, hundreds of them, financial records, correspondence, even audio recordings on digital devices. Judge Hawthorne had been using the restaurant as a storage facility for evidence that would implicate dozens of co-conspirators. Maya's fingers found something else, a fire alarm, and she knew exactly what to do with it. The piercing shriek of the alarm system filled the 40th floor as Maya's small voice echoed through the restaurant's intercom system. She'd found the kitchen's communication panel. "Detective Rodriguez, this is Maya. I found the treasure room. Judge Hawthorne has been hiding everything in the restaurant kitchen, behind the big refrigerator." As emergency responders flooded the building and police backup arrived, Judge Hawthorne realized her carefully constructed empire was crumbling around her. "You think you've won?" she screamed at Richard over the alarm noise. "You have no idea how deep this goes. I'm just one piece of a machine that's been running for decades." But Richard was no longer listening. Maya had emerged from the kitchen, her backpack now bulging with evidence that would put Judge Hawthorne away for life. "We did it, Mr. Richard," Maya said, slipping her hand into his as police officers led the judge away in handcuffs. "We found all the bad people." "Yes, we did," Richard agreed, pulling her close, "thanks to the bravest 7-year-old in Seattle." But even as they celebrated their victory, Richard knew Maya's words would haunt him. "I'm just one piece of a machine that's been running for decades." How many more pieces were still out there? How many more Vincent Carmichaels and Judge Hawthornes were operating in plain sight? Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, justice had finally caught up with the people who'd stolen his life and murdered his wife. And Richard Blackwood, with his remarkable 7-year-old partner, was just getting started. 6 months after Judge Hawthorne's arrest, Richard Blackwood stood in the reconstructed boardroom of Meridian Industries, his fingers tracing the familiar grain of the mahogany table that had witnessed both his greatest triumph and his deepest betrayal. The room felt different now, not just because of the new furniture and fresh paint, but because of the small voice coming from the corner where Maya sat at her own desk, carefully reviewing the simplified financial reports he'd asked her to examine. "Mr. Richard, the charity foundation numbers look really good this month," Maya announced, her reading skills having improved dramatically under the tutoring of her new teacher, Sarah Mitchell, who had recovered from her poisoning and accepted Richard's offer to become Meridian's Director of Educational Outreach. "That's wonderful news, Maya," Richard replied, still marveling at how naturally she'd adapted to her new role as his unofficial junior advisor. The courts had formalized his guardianship 3 months ago, making official what their hearts had known since that first morning in the diner. They were family now. The company's recovery had been swift once the criminal network was dismantled, Assets worth over $3 billion had been recovered and returned to Meridian, while dozens of Vincent's victims received compensation from seized accounts. But more importantly, Richard had rebuilt the company with a new philosophy: transparency, ethical oversight, and a commitment to giving back that would have made his late wife proud. "Sarah's here for lunch," Maya announced, looking out the window at the woman approaching the building. Sarah Mitchell had aged during her hospital stay, but her step was lighter now, free from the burden of carrying deadly secrets alone. When Sarah entered the boardroom, the reunion was everything Richard had hoped for. 3 years of grief-driven isolation melted away as he embraced his sister-in-law, finally able to express the gratitude he should have shown when she first tried to warn him about Vincent. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," he whispered, "for shutting you out, for not listening, for—" "Stop," Sarah said firmly. "You were grieving." "I understood then, and I understand now. What matters is that we're here together, and the people who hurt our Sarah are paying for their crimes." Maya joined their embrace, her small arms barely reaching around both adults. "Miss Sarah, tell Mr. Richard about the new school program." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Richard, the foundation is funding literacy programs in 12 shelters across the state. We're teaching children like Maya, kids who've fallen through the cracks, how to read, how to recognize their own worth, how to believe in better futures." "How many children so far?" "Over 200. And Maya's idea about teaching them to spot financial fraud in simple terms. It's revolutionary. These kids have street smarts that could protect them from predators their entire lives." Richard felt pride swell in his chest. Maya's suggestion to include bad money tricks in the curriculum had come from her own experience of recognizing the patterns in Vincent's documents. Now, other vulnerable children would have the same tools that had helped her save his life. Detective Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, wearing a smile instead of his usual serious expression. "Hope I'm not interrupting a family moment." "You're part of the family now, Detective," Maya said seriously. "Mr. Richard says people who save your life get adopted into the family automatically." Rodriguez chuckled. "In that case, I have good news for the family. Judge Hawthorne was sentenced this morning, life in prison without parole. Vincent got 45 years. Wright and the others received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. And the larger network, still being dismantled. Your case broke open corruption schemes in 4 states, dozens of arrests, hundreds of millions in recovered assets. Maya, your teacher hunt skills helped catch some very bad people." Maya beamed with pride, then grew serious. "Detective Rodriguez, are there more bad people like Judge Hawthorne out there?" "Probably. But now there are also more good people like you and Mr. Richard watching for them." As Rodriguez left to return to his duties, Richard moved to the window overlooking downtown Seattle. The city looked different, through windows that no longer represented the summit of his empire, but rather the foundation of something better. Meridian Industries was smaller now, more focused, but infinitely more meaningful. "Mr. Richard," Maya's voice was thoughtful, "do you ever miss being really rich?" Richard considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, he'd been worth $5 billion and had felt completely alone. Today, he was worth considerably less in monetary terms, but immeasurably richer in every way that mattered. "Maya, do you know what I learned from losing everything?" "What?" "That the most valuable things in life can't be stolen. Love, friendship, family, purpose, those belong to us completely, and no one can take them away unless we let them." Maya nodded solemnly. "Like how you and Miss Sarah and Detective Rodriguez and me are family now, even though we didn't start that way." "Exactly like that." Sarah moved to join them at the window. "Richard, there's something I need to tell you. something I found in our Sarah's personal effects that I never had the courage to share before. She handed him a letter written in his late wife's careful handwriting. Maya read it aloud. "My dearest Richard, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably lost in grief. But I need you to know something. Your greatest strength was never your business sense or your determination. Your greatest strength is your capacity to see the best in people and bring it out in them. You did that for me every day of our marriage. Promise me you'll do it for someone else when you're ready. The world needs more people who can see potential where others see only problems. All my love, Sarah." Richard's eyes filled with tears as he looked at Maya, who was carefully organizing charitable donation requests by category and urgency level. His wife had been right. His gift wasn't for building financial empires, but for building people up. And Maya, this remarkable child who'd saved his life and taught him to fight again, was proof that the most extraordinary people often come from the most unexpected places. "Maya," he said, "how would you feel about becoming my official co-president of the Maya and Richard Foundation for Street Smart Kids?" Co-president, really? Really? After all, you're the one who found the evidence, caught the bad guys, and figured out how to help other kids like yourself. Seems to me you've earned it." Maya's smile could have powered the entire city. "Can we make Detective Rodriguez the head of security and Miss Sarah the head of teaching? I think that's a perfect idea." As the Seattle sun set behind the Olympic Mountains, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility, Richard Blackwood realized that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. He'd started this journey as a bitter, defeated man with nothing left to lose. He was ending it as a father, a brother, a friend, and a force for good in a world that desperately needed more light in its darker corners. And beside him, a 7-year-old girl who'd once searched dumpsters for survival now planned strategies to help other forgotten children find their way to safety and dignity. In the end, the greatest fortune Richard Blackwood ever accumulated wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in lives changed, hope restored, and love multiplied beyond anything Vincent Carmichael could ever have imagined stealing. The little girl from the streets had taught the blind billionaire to see again. And together they would ensure that no child would ever have to face the darkness alone.